History has a very unsettling habit. It loves making enormous disasters out of unbelievably tiny problems, not giant monsters. Not cartoon villains pressing giant red buttons. More often than not, it's one tiny decision, one overlooked detail, one person saying, "Hey, it's probably fine," and then thousands of lives change forever. That's one of the most disturbing truths hiding inside famous disasters. They rarely begin looking like disasters. Imagine watching someone build a tower using blocks. One block is slightly crooked, no big deal. Another block doesn't quite fit, still standing. A third block gets forced into place because lunch is in 20 minutes. Hours later, the whole thing collapses. Everyone points at the final block. But the final block wasn't really the problem. It was simply unlucky enough to arrive last. Human beings love simple explanations. One mistake, one bad guy, one dramatic explosion. Our brains absolutely adore stories with a single villain because they're easy to remember. Reality is far less satisfying. Most historical catastrophes are more like domino chains that nobody realized had already started falling. Take transportation disasters. Whether it's ships, trains, aircraft, or industrial accidents, investigators almost never discover one magical cause. Instead, they uncover dozens. A warning light that had been ignored before. Equipment that should have been replaced. Communication that wasn't clear enough. Weather that was slightly worse than expected. Someone assuming another person had already checked something. None of these seem terrifying on their own. Together, they become history books. Engineers even have a nickname for this idea. It's often called the Swiss cheese model. Imagine stacking slices of Swiss cheese. Each slice has holes. One layer represents equipment, another represents training. Another represents procedures. Another represents human judgment. Normally, the holes don't line up. One layer catches another's mistake, but occasionally, every hole aligns. Suddenly, the problem passes through every defense without hitting anything solid. Disaster doesn't happen because one safety system failed. It happens because several small failures accidentally cooperate. Which is honestly kind of rude. Think about how many times you've left your house, forgot your wallet, went back inside, then forgot your keys, went back again. Then almost walked out wearing slippers. Individually, these mistakes are harmless. Imagine making all of them while operating something carrying hundreds of people. The stakes change dramatically. One disturbing pattern appears over and over throughout history. People often recognize danger, just not enough danger. Someone notices unusual vibrations. We should probably look at that eventually. A strange smell, that's weird, an alarm. It's probably another false alarm. Humans are remarkably talented at normalizing strange things. If something bad doesn't happen immediately, your brain slowly reclassifies it as normal. The weird becomes ordinary. The dangerous becomes routine. Psychologists call this normalization of deviance. It's one of the scariest habits our brains have. Imagine driving over a bridge every day. The first time you notice a crack, it feels alarming. A week later, still there. A month later, you barely notice it. Nothing terrible has happened yet, so your brain quietly updates the rulebook. Cracks must be normal. Except reality doesn't care what your brain believes. Metal still fatigues, concrete still weakens. Physics continues refusing to negotiate. Another uncomfortable truth. Experience can sometimes make people overconfident instead of safer. Someone who has completed the same task successfully thousands of times naturally becomes more relaxed. Confidence increases, attention decreases. Shortcuts appear, nothing goes wrong, again and again. Eventually, the shortcut feels safer than following the actual procedure. Until the one-day conditions change. History contains countless examples where experienced professionals weren't defeated by ignorance. They were defeated by familiarity. They had survived every previous shortcut. Their brains assumed today's shortcut would survive too. It's amazing how quickly success convinces humans they are invincible. until reality politely disagrees. Communication failures deserve their own museum. Entire disasters have unfolded because one sentence was misunderstood. One assumption wasn't clarified. One warning sounded less urgent than intended. One person believed someone else was already handling the problem. Human language feels incredibly precise. It isn't. Two people can hear the exact same sentence and imagine completely different situations. That's mildly inconvenient when ordering pizza. It's catastrophic when coordinating emergency responses. Perhaps the creepiest part is realizing none of these people woke up planning to become part of history. Nobody gets dressed thinking, today feels like a great day for a catastrophic systems failure. They were ordinary people having ordinary workdays, making ordinary decisions. Inside systems that quietly accumulated invisible risk for months, sometimes years. The disaster often began long before anyone noticed. The final moment simply made the hidden problems impossible to ignore. Basically, history isn't usually destroyed by one gigantic mistake. It's destroyed by hundreds of tiny mistakes that politely agreed to meet at exactly the wrong time. Imagine standing in a crowded room, nothing seems unusual, people are talking, someone's laughing. Another person is checking their phone. For the 8th time in 3 minutes, because apparently modern humans can't survive 20 seconds without consulting a glowing rectangle. Everything feels normal, then someone notices something, not everyone, just one person, they stop smiling, they look toward a doorway. Maybe they hear an unusual sound, maybe they smell smoke. Maybe they simply realize something isn't right. Here's the disturbing truth. Disasters rarely begin with panic. They usually begin with confusion. Hollywood loves showing instant chaos. One loud noise, everyone screams. People immediately sprint in every direction. Reality is much stranger. Psychologists studying emergencies have repeatedly found that many people initially do almost nothing, not because they are foolish. Because the brain hates accepting that normal life has suddenly stopped being normal. Your mind has one favorite assumption: everything is probably fine. Most of the time, that's actually useful. Imagine if every strange sound convinced you civilization was ending. You'd never sleep. You'd call emergency services because your refrigerator made an unusual noise. Again. Instead, your brain prefers ordinary explanations. Smoke, probably burnt food, strange smell, someone spilled chemicals, alarm, false alarm. Someone else will deal with it. This instinct has a name: normalcy bias. It's the brain's stubborn refusal to believe something extraordinary is happening, even when evidence starts piling up. Normal yesterday. Normal today, probably normal tomorrow. Your brain is basically the world's most optimistic detective. It keeps insisting the obvious mystery has a boring explanation. Until reality barges through the front door carrying undeniable evidence. By then, valuable time may already be gone. History is filled with heartbreaking examples where people delayed evacuating because they wanted confirmation first. They collected belongings. Finished conversations, locked doors, returned for one more item, looked for family members. Checked whether co-workers were leaving. These actions sound irrational from the safety of hindsight, inside the moment. They are completely understandable. Humans crave certainty. Emergencies rarely provide it. Another unsettling truth is that people constantly look at each other for clues. Imagine you're in a theater. Suddenly you hear an odd popping sound. If everyone else remains seated, you're surprisingly likely to stay seated too. Not because you've analyzed the situation. Because your brain quietly asks, does everyone else seem worried? If the answer is no, maybe everything's fine. Psychologists call this social proof. We copy other people's behavior constantly without realizing it. Normally, it's incredibly useful. If everyone lines up somewhere, you assume that's where the line belongs. If everyone suddenly ducks, you duck first and ask questions later. But during unusual situations, social proof can become dangerously misleading. Everyone waits for someone else to react. Meanwhile, everyone else is doing exactly the same thing. It's like watching an entire crowd politely wait for permission to acknowledge reality. Ironically, genuine panic is often much rarer than movies suggest. People frequently help strangers, share information, guide children, carry injured people, hold doors, organize themselves surprisingly well. The bigger problem isn't uncontrollable fear, it's delayed recognition. The emergency often spends precious minutes disguising itself as an inconvenience. By the time everyone agrees something is seriously wrong, the situation may have changed dramatically. That's why emergency planning focuses so heavily on early recognition and clear communication. The sooner people understand what's happening, the sooner they can make useful decisions. Our brains are extraordinary. They are capable of solving impossible problems, creating art, inventing technology, learning languages, and somehow convincing themselves that smoke filling a hallway is probably someone burning toast. Basically, your brain would rather spend 5 minutes believing everything is normal than admit reality has suddenly become terrifying. Imagine buying a smoke alarm that beeps every afternoon. Day 1, you jump out of your chair. Day 3, you sigh. Day 7, you don't even look up. By day 30, if it suddenly starts beeping because your kitchen is actually on fire, your first thought isn't, "We're in danger." It's, "Ugh. Not this thing again, congratulations." You've just met one of the most dangerous psychological traps in history. One of the darkest truths hiding inside countless famous disasters is that warning signs often existed long before catastrophe struck. The problem wasn't always a lack of information. It was that people slowly stopped reacting to it. Humans are astonishingly adaptable. That's usually one of our greatest strengths. You move next to a train station. The first week, every passing train sounds like the end of civilization. A month later, you sleep through it. Someone else visits your apartment and asks, "How do you live with that noise?" You honestly forgot it was there. Your brain quietly edits it out. This ability keeps us from becoming overwhelmed by constant stimulation. Imagine consciously noticing every humming refrigerator, every air conditioner, every blinking light, every distant conversation all day long. You'd lose your mind before lunch. So your brain develops a filter. If something keeps happening without hurting you, it becomes background noise, unfortunately. Danger doesn't care about your filters. One of the most chilling patterns investigators discover after major accidents is a history of almost failed, almost broke, almost exploded, almost collapsed, almost. Each almost becomes evidence that everything is actually okay. Because if the last 50 warnings didn't end in disaster, surely warning number 51 won't either. That's not logic. That's psychological conditioning. Your brain is collecting proof that ignoring the warning has worked before. It's building confidence based on survival rather than safety. Those are two very different things. Imagine flipping a coin. It lands on heads 10 times in a row. Some people begin believing tails has become impossible. Reality disagrees. The coin doesn't remember yesterday, neither does physics. History contains repeated examples where alarms had sounded before, sensors had malfunctioned before, equipment had behaved strangely before. Nothing terrible happened, so everyone became a little less concerned the next time. And a little less the time after that. Until eventually, the real emergency arrived wearing the exact same costume as all the harmless ones. The disturbing part is that this isn't stupidity, it's efficiency. Your brain constantly asks one question: what deserves my attention? If something repeatedly turns out to be harmless, paying attention becomes expensive. Ignoring it becomes rewarding. You save mental energy, you reduce stress. You stop interrupting your work every 5 minutes. Your brain thinks it's becoming smarter. Instead, it's becoming comfortable. Comfort and safety aren't always teammates. Sometimes they are bitter enemies. This is why safety experts obsess over investigating near misses. A near miss is exactly what it sounds like. Something nearly went horribly wrong. Nobody got hurt, everything turned out fine, most people celebrate. Safety investigators become extremely interested. Because a near miss is like reality whispering, "You got lucky." Luck is wonderful. It's also a terrible long-term business strategy. Think about driving. Suppose someone checks their phone while driving once, nothing happens; twice, still nothing; 100 times, still alive. Eventually, the brain reaches a dangerous conclusion. Checking the phone must be safe, except it isn't. The driver simply hasn't met the wrong intersection at the wrong second. Luck has been quietly covering the bill. History is full of disasters where luck eventually ran out. There's another strange psychological twist. People often trust familiar systems more than unfamiliar evidence. Imagine a machine you've used every day for 15 years. One morning it makes a strange noise. Your first instinct probably isn't, "This machine is about to destroy itself." It's, "That's new." Experience makes us feel secure, sometimes too secure. Ironically, the more familiar we become with something, the easier it becomes to underestimate its risks. It's the same reason people are often more careful driving in unfamiliar places than on roads they've driven for years. Familiarity quietly turns attention into autopilot. Autopilot saves effort until something changes. Then there are organizations. Groups develop habits just like individuals. If an unusual problem keeps resolving itself, people begin treating it as normal. New employees learn from experienced ones. Experienced employees learned from the people before them. Eventually, everyone inherits the same relaxed attitude towards something that was originally considered unacceptable. No one intended to lower standards. Standards simply drifted very slowly. So slowly that almost nobody noticed. Imagine painting a wall one shade darker every day. You wouldn't notice much difference. Come back 6 months later, and the room looks completely different. Risk often changes exactly like that. Tiny shifts, tiny compromises, tiny assumptions. Until the final result barely resembles the original plan. The scariest warning isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's the warning that's become so common nobody bothers looking anymore. Basically, the human brain has an incredible ability to ignore familiar problems, which is fantastic for living next to noisy neighbors. Less fantastic when the noise is reality, repeatedly asking for your attention.